Schmitt. Mr. Schmitt, welcome, sir. Pleasure. Just a word on tax hikes. You see these tax hikes coming in Republican Senate and House?
I've not heard any of that. I feel like this is one of those things where a bureaucrat in some agency wants to have a conversation with a reporter, and then they run with it. I've not heard any of that. Our focus really is to extend those tax cuts, and with the current policy baseline, there is no fiscal impact. It's current law. We're going to extend those pro-growth tax cuts, and I think you're also going to have a lot of savings. There's a lot of discussion where most of the discussion is really coming from is spending reforms. You got to remember that just in 2019, not 1919, 2019, 5 years ago, we were spending just $4 trillion, spending $7 trillion. We take in $5 trillion. If we could actually get to a place where we had pre-pandemic spending levels plus inflation plus population growth, we could actually have a balanced budget, Larry, in a couple years. And I think that should be a goal of ours, is on the spending reform side. So if you look at tax policy, regulatory reform, you've got trade policy, and then, of course, energy policy. If we do all those things right, which I think we can in the next few months, we're up for a golden age in America, as President Trump's talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I just, when I first heard this Bloomberg article stuff last night, I got very excited about it. My friend Brett Baer loaned me some Advil or whatever, Tylenol, to calm me down. And I reread the article this morning, and you're right. I mean, I see people tossing around ideas. Mr. Trump is open to it. Down through the years, I've known President Trump to be open to a lot of things. He'll look at them, and then he'll reject them. And he's not going to be raising. He's not going to raise taxes. You're not going to raise taxes on small businesses, Senator, right? That'd be the worst part of all.
Yeah, he's very collaborative, as you know. I mean, he really works like a CEO in a boardroom. He wants to hear different opinions. He makes the final decisions, and his instincts are legendary. But he knows he has this historic opportunity, right? Historic opportunity with the House and the Senate. He won the popular vote. He won all the battleground states. And what he talked about on the campaign trail was, making sure our border's secure. That's happening. Making sure that we're treated fairly in these trade deals across the world. That's happening right now. These countries are coming to the table, having a robust energy policy, all these things that were part of the America First agenda, sort of methodically ticking these things off. He's got his team in place to go do it. It's really important to have those reformers on the inside. He's got that team in the cabinet. So I'm very optimistic that over the spring and the summer, we're going to be able to further execute on this agenda.
Now, you're a former state attorney general in the great state of Missouri. The state attorney general in New York, Letitia James, a big thorn in Trump's side, she appears to be in a heap of trouble about badly documented mortgage applications. She doesn't live in Virginia. She had a smaller home in New York. I know you followed this as a former state AG. What do you make of this?
It sounds like somebody who made a big deal about saying that nobody was above the law and may have a bit of comeuppance here, right? By the way, something she talked about, how these technicalities really matter, as she went after President Trump on a bogus claim. She's in a world of hurt here. She's got some problems. So I guess, Tish James, if you're watching, call your office.
You think the Justice Department will take up the lawsuit? Who knows? It's hard to say at this point. Call your office. I like that a lot. The other one I want to get to, and we'll get to Japan in a minute, but I want to get to Easter. You are proposing that the day after Easter be a national holiday. It's a great tradition in Western civilization, people of faith, of which I count myself. Tell me a little bit about that, and what kind of chance does it have?
I think it's an important signal to send, and I don't view this as a Republican thing or a Democrat thing. This is a very American thing, honoring a holiday that's celebrated by 81% of Americans. And I just think it would give people an opportunity, if they're traveling, to spend time with loved ones and celebrate Easter. In my view, it shouldn't be that controversial. We hope to get support on this in a bipartisan way. It's pro-worker, it's pro-faith. It's pro-America. So I think this is something that in a world where everything seems to be controversial, hopefully we can come together and say, you know what, the Monday after Easter ought to be a national holiday. We already have a National Day of Prayer. I think this would be a really good thing for us to do.
Wouldn't surprise me if Mr. Trump agreed with you.
I bet. Yep. I don't want to get too far ahead of it, but I believe this is something that he would. And you know absolutely. You know what's interesting is he had a really important Holy Week message at the end of last week, as we're now in Holy Week.
Yes.
You've got a president now that actually honors these things and cares about it. The last president had the insult of all insults. He had, the Trans Day of Visibility on Easter Sunday last week. I mean, our last year is just nuts. So I'm glad President Trump's in office. I think he understands how important these things are to people.
Yeah, got it. Let me read you from Truth Social. Japan is coming today to negotiate tariffs, the cost of military support, and trade fairness. I will attend the meeting along with Treasury and Commerce Secretaries. Hopefully something can be worked out, which is good or great for Japan and the USA. Japan could be one of the early deals. Vietnam could be an early deal. India could be an early deal. But the point I was going to ask you is, there is this possibility that you're going to get 15 whatever deals in the next 90 days or the next, how many days are left? 85 days. Okay. And that will be a template for all the other countries. And the reality, I'm just positing this, get your take, Senator Schmitt. The reality is Trump's, strong, aggressive, protecting American business and industries, where he wants reciprocal tariff charges. But if both sides reduce it reciprocally, tariff and non-tariff, we may wind up with much freer, more open trade with better market access for this country than we've ever had, at least in the last 50 some odd years. In other words, this could turn out to be a very significant success on Mr. Trump's part. I know the whole world and Wall Street is screaming at him. People are knocking their heads. And Jay Powell caused a market rout today because he shouldn't be speaking about things he doesn't understand. But the reality is Trump could turn out to be right, couldn't he, Senator Schmitt?
Absolutely, and I think Jay Powell's comments today were really irresponsible.
Yeah.
And showed a real sort of a partisan bent to how he views his role. I just think it's unfortunate. But having said that, you're absolutely right. I think President Trump understands America isn't just some economic zone. It's a place. It's our home. Too many jobs have been shipped overseas. So not only the end result will be trade barriers reduced in other countries, more access for our products in other markets, we're also going to have record investment in this country. You've already seen it, up to $5 trillion, whether it's NVIDIA or Honda or Mercedes-Benz, these countries that are deciding that the best place to do business is in the United States of America. So it's a twofer, right? We get a better deal. We've been treated very unfairly, and also we produce more things here. That's very important. I'll also say this, Larry. I think it's important to view this in two different buckets. You've got China, and then you've got everybody else.
Right.
And so by dealing with these, the calculation of not just the tariffs, but the trade barriers, all those other things that go into this calculation of that reciprocal nature, he put a pause on that because over 70 to 100 countries have said, hey, we want to cut a deal. I think he's going to go about doing that methodically. It's important that it's starting, I think, in Asia. It's sending a very clear message to communist China that we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to allow you to have 5 times the number of exports. We're not going to allow you to access 40% of all the consumer spending in the world. And you rip off our IP, you rip off our businesses, you steal, you subsidize and dump products, taking out American businesses. So I think China's made a real mistake here by escalating it. We'll see if they come to the table. They probably should, but I think all the other countries understand that they've had barriers in place for a long time. I actually can't understand, Larry, how no one has taken this on prior to President Trump. When people learn about the things that we can't sell in other places because of the protectionist policies of other countries, it really is shocking. And so these reciprocal tariffs, I think, ultimately, they've been paused now to get a better deal.
Yeah.
And you're right. We're going to have fairer trade now across the globe, and the United States will benefit from this. We have to have a change in policy after the Cold War. We never did it.
Trump is at Fox Xi. He's at Foxton, man. Xi, who thinks he's such a big shot, he thinks he's the emperor over there, just lost his biggest customer. So what's he going to do with all the billions and billions of cheap goods he's got? The answer is he's going to have to eat them. Anyway, we don't have enough time to talk about eating cheap sneakers, but that's basically what's going to happen here. Trump is at Fox Xi because he's smarter. Anyway, Senator Eric Schmitt.